Hello, devoted followers of Oh My Econ. Yasmin is here. Our brand new podcast series is back. We're producing two sets of podcasts talk on the topic of behavioral economics. This will be a discussion-based podcast, discussing a range of biases and our opinions on each one. We hope you enjoy the two podcasts we have prepared for you and learn more with Oh My Econ. Today I'm joined by Timur and Islam, all special members of our Oh My Econ family. It is a pleasure to have all of you here today. We're diving deeper into the intriguing world of behavioral economics. Welcome to everyone. So first, let's kick things off with omission bias. So what exactly is omission bias? It's a cognitive bias that reveals a lot about human ethical decision making. Omission bias occurs when people perceive harmful actions, like actively causing harm, as worse than equally dangerous inactions, such as allowing harm to occur. In essence, individuals often prepare not to take action even if it results in harm, rather than actively taking an action that leads to harm. Now, Timur, I am directing to you. Take this topic and just introduce the topic a little deeper to all of us.
So let me start. So there's actually an interesting case study with this bias, actually related to this bias. It is the polio vaccine. So basically, I think it was 1960s or 70s in the US. There was polio around, and basically, your child could catch polio with a chance, I think, was 1 in 10. And then there was also a small chance that they could die from it. So they basically then introduced two types of vaccines. One based on the active type of the virus and another inactive. And so basically the inactive does not lead to death in any cases, but it just reduces the risk of catching polio. And the active one actually reduces the risk to zero, but there is a small chance, even smaller chance, that your child will die if he has the vaccine than if he catches polio. So the chances are much smaller, but people just refused, and the parents refused to give the active type vaccine to their children because of the omission bias. So basically, they perceive that if their child will die, that will be on their hands, and therefore, even though that the chances were much lower than just the child catching polio and dying, they still didn't give the child the active vaccine.
Hey, so like the active vaccine, there was like a really small chance of like the child dying from the vaccine, but it decreased the chance of getting polio to like zero, and obviously the chances of dying from polio are higher than from the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
And
so basically it was like that, yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly that like parents don't want to take the responsibility of like knowing that there's this chance that their child can die from their own hands rather than a disease.
Yeah, I think in this case, also it shows like the ethics. It also takes into account ethics and beliefs of the parents. But however, it is an irrational bias because statistically, speaking, not giving, because even if you don't give the vaccine to the child, and the child catches polio and then unfortunately passes away, that is also on your hands. So not taking action, neutrality can also, this is what omission bias is about basically, right? As I understand, because you're not taking action, but you perceive like you don't have any responsibility, but not taking action also has impacts, like the child dying from polio, right?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that it happened actually, because as you said, not taking any action is also an action.
Yeah.
But here it is, the omission bias. And so it was, really interesting, actually.
That's a really
interesting case study.
Yeah, that's a really interesting case study. I think the same can be said probably about like COVID vaccines. Some people wouldn't take them because there was a chance of like a heart attack or something, but it was much lower than dying from COVID. But I guess it also depends on the age groups.
With the vaccines it also was pretty interesting because there was also a lot of information about the vaccines, like they could cause heart attacks or anything else, and people just didn't take them, even though COVID was really widespread and
Yeah.
a lot of people, actually caught COVID, and there's a much higher chance of actually dying from COVID, or you'd have long-lasting effects from COVID than just taking the vaccine.
Yeah, and also if you think about it from a different perspective, when you don't get the vaccine or like you don't give your child the polio vaccine, your child can get polio and then also infect someone else, like another child, and that child might die, which is also kind of your responsibility, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why this like omission bias is so interesting. That like people think that making like not having this in action is actually less harmful than actually like pursuing some action for a better and more positive cause. Do you think like omission bias also like can be taken as like in the form of like not taking part or like not taking action when you see someone else being bullied? Do you think it can be applied to that situation?
I think, yeah, because you're also perceiving yourself as if you're not taking action, it's actually better. But it's actually better to take action. Yeah, in this situation too, I believe.
Yeah, to an extent, I agree that it's maybe a part of omission bias in this case.
Have you ever had an experience of like this omission bias in your daily life?
Oh, it's kind of a personal thing, but sometimes like in our family, like we argue, and like someone like for example, someone from my family says that it's actually not better to like argue and debate on these topics, but I believe being inactive and not debating and arguing on some topics in the long term is actually worse than taking action. And maybe it can cause some like arguments or debates in the meanwhile, but in the long term I believe it's better, same as in like the vaccine case, because like from the perspective of that person that's telling me that, they believe that by being neutral it's actually better because like it retains the status quo which they are used to.
Another example.
Timur, you can I'll add on them later.
Thank you. Another one example that I can think actually from my life is opening a deposit, basically in a bank, because I had some cash laying around, and I was thinking actually of just opening a deposit into a bank or just keep it. And basically, when I opened my deposit, I was stressing a lot about the tenge crashing, as I thought that if I would just bought with dollars with my money, with my tenge, I'll make much more money than if I open the deposit. But the interesting thing is that that time when I didn't have a deposit, I didn't really care about the value of tenge in respect to dollar, and that's also pretty interesting. I think that could also be a part of the omission bias to an extent.
So you chose not to open a deposit account because of like fearing that you will ultimately lose?
Yeah, it led me for like around 5 or 6 months actually not opening a deposit account, even though I could have made like 8% on my money in that period, just because of the fear.
Oh, but I think this situation actually maybe like more aligns with the loss aversion bias, if you're familiar with.
But potentially, with the loss aversion.
Yeah, where like people tend to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains, so they feel more like affected by losses, and like have this fear of, for example, investments. I think that this really applies to like investment opportunities, that people will tend to not invest in certain things because they have this greater fear of losing, even though they can ultimately acquire equivalent gains to that.
Yeah, and loss aversion, it links basically also to prospect theory. And if you look at prospect theory, basically one of the main things that the prospect theory says, and it was made by Daniel Kahneman and Tversky, I think, so is that we value losses 2 times more than we actually value the gains, and therefore, leads to loss aversion, which is actually irrational behavior.
But do you think that like we can consider like nature of a human beings as like irrational? Like, do you think like as people we understand that from the human nature we're ultimately like affected by our emotional decisions? So can like emotional decisions really be stated as like irrational behavior, or is it?
I mean, in some cases it is irrational, but sometimes you have, in my opinion, like being fully controlled by your emotions is irrational, but at the same time being but on the other hand being like programmatic and always doing the rational choice, for example, if you have some goal and like you're always doing the rational choice to get to that goal, I believe that is also not the right way to go, because basically that is and sometimes you have to listen to your emotions, because in the long term it will be more rational, because you would be happier, in my opinion.
The interesting thing is about rationality is that we view it in terms of only monetary value. We don't view it in terms of psychological value. So maybe actually the things that we consider rational in terms of monetary value are maybe rational in terms of psychological value.
Actually, this is really smart what like Timur said. This is exactly what I wanted to what I meant. You explained it really well, because I believe, like, for example, when I was doing my GC exams, I was my only like goal was to like get like really good grades, but that kind of had some harm on my mental health, because I spent way too much time revising and all that stuff, because in my head the rational choice was to be like it was, I valued it in a monetary way, because I thought that I will get good grades and then I'll go to a good university and I'll just make a lot of money. That was basically my logical chain of thinking. But now I think I matured and I value happiness more than monetary gain.
Exactly. Is it okay if I speak, Timur?
Of course.
Oh yeah, I think it's like it really refers to the bounded rationality. If you guys are familiar with this concept, it was proposed by Herbert Simon, I believe, and in this, like, he acknowledged that people have like cognitive limitations and cannot always make perfectly rational decisions. So there's like a balance between each, because like instead of like aiming for like satisfying solutions that are good enough given their like constraints. So he understands that like heuristics can lead to like both rational and irrational decisions, and what is considered reasonable can depend on whether like on the perspective that you are looking at. For example, from a logical or a normative perspective, or from perspective of how people naturally make decisions. So I think in practice, it's essential to like have a balance between both of these viewpoints.
Yeah, I think from a viewpoint of an economist, everyone would be irrational. But yeah, from a viewpoint probably from a psychologist, we would also be all irrational. It's really interesting, because I really like when economics and psychology combine like topics that combine both economics and psychology, and look at the way that the human brain works and extrapolate that into economics, and basically how that leads to how the economy works, basically.
Psychology basically provides a deeper insight of why we make certain decisions, and therefore I think it's pretty important to be a part of economics. And it arises actually a question of, is econometrics really that accurate, since we are trying to build mathematical models where the main agents are irrational a lot of the times?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
very well.
I guess I mean all of these models they always take in an assumption that every agent is rational, and I believe this is probably one of the reasons why economists uh, are not really accurate in their prediction making. But because I mean, economics is really hard to predict, obviously, because there's so many variables controlling it.
Mhm.
Practically impossible to build like an accurate way of predicting it. But like one really interesting thing I saw like recently, I think I also wrote an article about it. It's how they used AI, like they used machine learning, and they gave this AI bot thousands of like articles on the economy, like from I think Wall Street Journal, like back from the 20th century, for like decades of worth of articles, like predictions on the economy and like the state of the economy, and they used those articles to teach the AI bot to predict recessions and predict growth. Obviously, it's still in the starting stages, but I think, in my opinion, it'll be really interesting to see how this goes. I think it was done by Yale research team. I think in the future, I would really like to like get a deeper dive into this and try to work on something like this. I think it's a really cool thing.
Oh yeah, that's extremely interesting. Yeah, I think I've read your article. Did you share it on Oh My Econ?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. I remember Mark like looking at it and like changing some grammar issues.
Oh yeah. And it's just the grammar that's so the problems. Everything else was fine.
Yeah. So do you have any other like biases that you're maybe like very interested in? I think we can also like maybe explore the confirmation bias, if you guys know about it. The bias like that impacts how we process information and perceive like the whole world around us. I think it's like a huge thing that ultimately affects each one of us. And it occurs when like individuals tend to seek out and interpret and remember information in a way that confirms their pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses while ignoring or downplaying contradictory evidence. Because like throughout the summer, I was actually working on an internship at MasterCard, and I was researching on this concept of open banking. So in this, like it's a concept where through APIs, third parties gain like financial data about customers from banks. So it has like a range of benefits. And I conducted like a survey in Kazakhstan, like just testing out if people were actually willing to give their financial data to third parties. And I was really like interested to know that like even though many of the actual teenagers in Kazakhstan, they want to have these services available to them, they don't want to share their financial data. And I think that's like such a paradox, because there's like this, I don't know, there's like this viewpoint in our Kazakh society that sharing your financial data is something that to be like frowned upon, and it has to be like very private.
Yeah, I totally agree with it, since it was basically passed from our grandparents to our parents and then to us. And we basically, we don't really want to share our personal our financial information, even though it like does not really matter. Like it doesn't really show anything. It's just your financial information, and it could actually benefit you in the long term if the companies have actually access to it.
So
Mhm.
I believe in this case it's so connecting to the confirmation bias. The people, they had pre-existing beliefs about sharing your financial data online that were given by their grandparents, and then they would confirmation bias, they would seek out information and facts that would support their pre-existing beliefs, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
ignoring the information that contradicts those beliefs.
That is why like it's so interesting that like us as people like tend to do that. So like it really prohibits this like ability to like grow and like, for example, like change our mindset. Because like I think that's very evident in like specifically like the older people.
Yeah, I think
Their ability to
they're more
change beliefs. Yeah.
They have more conservative views in like life in general, not political, but like in life. Yeah, they usually just stick to their pre-existing beliefs, and they're not as like flexible to new information. But at the same time, I guess it just provides wisdom and its experience, and in some cases better. But I believe, yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's still the best way to go is to use critical thinking and always question your beliefs, and always question if what you're doing is right, or what you believe in is right, because as humans we need to do that to always achieve better, to live better. And also not only question yourself, but also question people around you, question if they are like morally right, or if like because in this sense, if people stop doing that in masses, it will lead to totalitarianism, where the government, because us as people, we always need to question the government, how well the government is doing. And but if we stop doing it, it leads to totalitarianism, where the government controls everything and it is not questioned, or there's no one ruling the government. Also, I believe confirmation bias would be close to empiricism, right? Because empiricism is the idea that all learning comes from experience and observations, right? So those people who stick to that idea of empiricism, they would rather believe their own like experience and their own observations than have rational thoughts and rational like critical thinking about their pre-existing beliefs. It's an idea in philosophy basically, and I also find it really interesting because it basically questions how people gain knowledge. It's either through the empiricism way or rationalism, where rationalism is logical thinking and more of critical thinking. And in my opinion, I'm more of a rationalist.
Oh. Yeah, I think, but like it's also like this confirmation bias is also very like highlighted in digital age, because like especially like with the prevalence of social media, this bias can contribute to the formation of echo chambers, where people are exposed primarily to like-minded perspectives. So it's really like harder for them to actually gain and input more information if like everything they see on social media, for example, like on social media specifically, because we spend so much time on our telephones, like scrolling through Instagram, there's this like algorithms built in that you see things that you ultimately like and prefer to see. So it's kind of makes it harder for us to be exposed to like any new information that maybe against,
especially with platforms like Facebook and older people with like certain political beliefs. For example, if they believe in something, they will get shared those posts, those articles that back up their beliefs. I think it causes more confirmation bias. Like, yes, you said in our digital age, probably confirmation bias is at its peak.
Yeah, exactly. For example, like even like climate change, there's still like so many people who don't believe in climate change, even though it's such an evident thing. And I think it's mostly stems from the fact that like for example, they only like on their platforms, they only see this like little statistics or like articles talking about how climate change is false and it's just an illusion.
I think social media needs to be regulated on this more, like with fact checkers or like those kind of organizations. Or like the government should regulate the social media more in this case, so there's less misinformation being spread. For example, also remember like there was the case in the 2016 elections where for example, supporters of Trump, they would just get they would get social media posts that would support Trump, and like the other way around for Hillary Clinton. And it's really interesting how like social media can manipulate people so much, just from the algorithms and all the other things. Also, the interesting thing about those researchers is what also needs to be more regulated is, in my opinion, is like lobbying, because those research studies exist where that oppose climate change, right, and stuff like that. They only exist due to lobbyists, the lobbyists from oil companies or huge corporations that want people to not care about climate change so they can continue to exploit the world. They lobby those research studies. I recently saw a video on it, like a really interesting one, where this one family, they have this huge business, like really rich family in USA. I forgot their names. They would like spend millions of dollars to promote ideas about like that climate change doesn't exist and stuff like that, purely for their financial gain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like the fact that like people are actually affected with them, like so many people are so influenced by social media. You can see like anything on your phone. For example, like I mean, I can even say that like I can be influenced by things I see on like on TikTok, even though like I'm not really a person who would trust TikTok as my main source of information, but still, you know, like you have this, for example, like the main thing, like herding, for example, right? If you see so many people doing like believing in something, you start to believe in it too, even though maybe previously you haven't believed in that. But because you see other people, your friends, maybe your family, start to get influenced by it, you start to get influenced by it, and it's just like a chain of effects. Chain of events.
I think it's like we can degrade the older generation, but we're also we're also victims of this. We also get influenced by social media, and we get influenced a lot, especially like our younger generation, like teenagers, and in very negative ways. I think it's I think in my opinion it should be regulated more, because the amount of people I saw being just miserable or just depressed from social media, like people my age, I think it's appalling. And I believe the government and just the world in as a whole needs to do better in this.
So like regulating like what information is actually spread to people.
Yeah, for example, you know, an interesting statistic, anxiety and depression rates amongst teenage girls from the age of like 12 to like 18 throughout the last decade, they have increased by tenfold. I believe, yeah.
But like what factors influence that? Like what variables actually led to them? What led to this?
I think because social media as a whole, it overexposes us, it overstimulates our brain. Like, for example, 20 years ago, you would only see, for example, in case of like body positivity and all that stuff, like 20 years ago, you would only see like really pretty people on like magazines, and that's it. But now you open TikTok or you open Instagram, and everyone there has a perfect body, has a everyone there is like super cool, super jacked, super fit. And then you look at yourself and you're just an average person, and you compare yourself to them, and that creates anxiety, and that creates insecurities in people.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a very interesting topic that you touched upon, like the fact that like we are teenagers, and like I think that at this point right now, a lot of really, really young people are exposed to social media at a very young age, because like right now I see a lot of kids that are like age of 5 who already have phones, and they see so many videos like that, and they're already exposed to like a lot of things that they probably shouldn't be exposed at such a young age. And for example, like even like an 11-year-old girl, right? I think she's very like she's going through like a hormonal change, and seeing like on social media that like people are like, I don't know, like traveling, maybe like they have this perfect bodies, perfect skin, just like it'll be like really influence, and like leads to like a lot of like comparing and jealousy, and just like
like even personally, I would say that I am quite a rational person. I try to use critical thinking, and I try to not compare myself to others, but it's still really hard. Like, for example, I go to the gym and I open social media, and then I see some 16-year-old boy with like insane genetics and like super jacked, and then I can start comparing myself to him, and like I think that I'm actually a failure because I've been trying so much and I'm like nowhere near him. But this is like really wrong, because at the end of the day you need to look at yourself and you need to compare yourself with only yourself, and always enjoy the journey more than the outcome.
Yes, I really agree with that point. Like, it's what is important is your well-being and your happiness, and like I think every person is ultimately very different from each other. Each of us have extremely different genetics, extremely different experiences in life, and like it's just like when you look at social media, I think specifically on Instagram, you see all those pictures and they're so like fascinating, and like people tend to show only like the positive aspects of their life. So it's very like easy for people to actually be like, oh, like her life is just so beautiful, and like I don't have that. And it's just, we still have to understand that like on social media, people tend to only show the positive sides of their life. So we shouldn't compare, because we never know what is actually happening to them, apart from the screen that is like displayed in our Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Islam, with the example that you provided with the gym, we can actually kind of link it to the Easterlin paradox. And it is basically a paradox that states that while the GDP per person actually increases, the happiness level stays the same. And it comes to the point that we like to compare ourselves. Even though everyone is getting richer, the happiness level is still the same due to everyone actually getting richer. And that basically creates a certain paradox.
It's all relative.
Yeah.
But I think it all also boils down to, because we're like basically the last like tens of generations of humans born on this planet were born in a capitalist system where happiness equals money, like money equals happiness. So I mean, the only way to get rid of that is to get rid of the system, but it's obviously impossible because it's just way too entrenched in our daily lives and just the world. Wouldn't it be nice if people just stopped caring about money and we just all be happy and we just do whatever we want? That would be amazing, in my opinion.
Like a world where we're not driven by like gaining money.
Yeah, like a communist world.
But since we actually like to compare ourselves to others, wouldn't it mean that if everyone was the same, we wouldn't be that happy, as even actually showed by the Easterlin paradox?
I think it's actually like a fallacy. There's this belief that humans are born greedy and we're born comparing ourselves to others. I was debating on this topic with a communist. I mean, I'm not communist myself, but like I was debating with someone, and apparently, basically, we as humans, we're not born to be greedy. We're not born wanting things and stuff. Basically, if we were born into a system where we're never told that, oh, you need to have a Ferrari and you'll be happy and all that stuff. We actually, as humans, we are very social and we would actually be friends with everyone and we wouldn't care about those things. And yeah, like before capitalism came in, the world basically worked as a gift economy, basically. Yes, people were just giving gifts to each other, not caring about the monetary value. They would have their little farm, they would make their own food and just live happily without caring about money and all that stuff. Obviously, yeah, I know, like back in that time they had like medical issues and capitalism solved all those things, and capitalism brings us comfort and technological advantages. And in my opinion, it's a really interesting topic to debate on, like, is capitalism broken, or like do we need to replace it, or is it working fine? Because there's loads of arguments to back it up, and there's lots of arguments against it. I believe like nowadays most problems that occur in people's lives are because of capitalism, or like of an average human. Mental problems, money problems, everything, in my opinion, can be traced back to capitalism. Also, by the way, I want to mention that we only have 3 minutes of time left.
Yes, so due to the time constraints, we're unable to continue with the discussion and we'll have to end on this note. I want to first and foremost thank Islam and Timur for joining me on this deep dive into the world of behavioral economics. It was an extremely informative and friendly discussion that I've had the opportunity to have with you guys. I really extremely enjoyed it. Thank you for your time. Now addressing our dear Oh My Econ followers, stay tuned for more intriguing discussion to come and learn more with Oh My Econ. Goodbye.